So I want to make a video about hand fighting in jiu-jitsu from a standing position. Now, this is one of the questions that I get probably asked the most when it comes to teaching beginners how to wrestle, how to fight from a standing position. Because if you're a beginner, you might be familiar with one of these two scenarios. Either you are taught very intricate and potentially long and complicated grip fighting sequences, a little bit as if this were a choreography, right? And obviously, then when the rubber meets the road, they don't tend to work because your partner never grabs exactly the way you want them to, and things don't work exactly the way you thought they would, right? Because it's a situation where there's a lot of entropy, right? Your partner has a lot of freedom to move, and it's very hard to predict exactly where your partner is going to grip so that you can initiate your pretty sequence. Or, on the other hand, maybe even worse, you might be familiar with someone telling you, oh, you should just develop a feeling for it. It's like, you should just sort of, get a sense of what you should do. It's like, well, thanks, great, but how does that even look like? What does this even mean in practical terms? So the way I approach grip fighting for beginners, and indeed for advanced students, is to say, well, I am going to give you guidelines. I'm going to give you heuristics. I'm going to give you goals, things that you are going to want to achieve, right? And then I'm going to give you a few strategies to achieve these goals, bearing in mind that these are strategies rather than very complicated sequence of grippings, okay? Because at the end of the day, gripping sequences are useful insofar as they allow you to generate predictable reaction from your opponent. This is where it comes down to. This is where you should get good at. Use hand fighting sequences to generate predictable reactions from your opponent. Because when you start to generate predictable reactions, it means that you're always one step ahead, as it were. And throughout these predictable reactions, because your opponent is playing a reactive game, it's very likely that they've been carrying weight the whole time throughout the hand fighting exchange. So an example of this would be this great match between Damien and Silva, which we're going to comment together. Now, first of all, Silva is much taller than Damien, right? And so you would expect, right, like in a boxing match, the taller opponent to have a little bit of an edge when it comes to grip fighting, because you would expect the opponent to be able to reach Damien without being reached, except that is never the case in this match. So for example, you see already Damien got in and got a collar tie and reset. Is always staying in out of reach enough so that if for Silva to actually make a grip, he would need to expose his legs too much. And so Silva is kind of reluctant to actually make a commit to a proper grip, because Damien has enough of a distance to prevent him, not exactly to prevent Silva from gripping, because otherwise he would stand somewhere here, right? But he is in a middle distance so that were Silva to actually commit to a grip, he would need to overextend his arm so much that then the leg would be available, right? And see, this is how he starts. Now, when Damien wants to engage, he's always going to get a heavy collar tie. And there you go. That's the collar tie. So Damien's whole thing throughout this whole match, and we're going to look at this together, is this idea of grip without being gripped. And so here we are. As now, Silva is already carrying body weight. He's already carrying Damien's body weight off of this collar tie. And this will be a pattern of movement that will happen throughout the match. This is very subtle, but Damien manages to force a step. Now, something that I tell my students every single time that we talk about this is that if you can force your partner to take a step, and if your step is sort of loud, it sounds like boom, sort of I force like a stomp, it means that you want that micro exchange. Because I force you to post. When you're playing guard and you have an off balance and you kind of force your partner to post with the hand on the ground, That is the same thing from a standing position. So whenever you force your partner to take a strong post with their foot, it means that they were actually off balance and they had to sort of commit to a post. And that they've been carrying body weight. Boom. That's the first one. There you go. He has to post with the leg. You don't really see because of the camera angle, but we're going to have more occasions. For now, just notice this configuration, this constellation here with Silva that has a very wide base, which makes him very stable in this direction, but not very stable in this direction. While Damien is in perfect posture here, in this contracted posture. We're going to look at this again because this will repeat throughout the match. Again, you see, Silva has a longer reach than Damien does, but he can never quite connect body weight onto Damien's head. It's kind of posting, but there's no body weight involved. And as soon as Damien makes a contact, here makes touches, now there's body weight involved from Damien's side. And again, there you go. You see this little snap that forces Silva into this sort of triangular here position just to recover. Snaps, and now we're in a situation in which Silva is actually grabbing, right? Well, you will see how every time Damien grabs, manages to bring Silva in this kind of triangular position. But the other way around is not true. Now Silva is hanging off Damien's head, but you will see how you will never manage to force Damien to take a wide step and post with his foot, because Damien is immediately going to clear this collar tie. And there you go, uncleared. You see no step on Damien's side, no post. There you go, clear the collar tie, and here you go, hanging again off Silva's head. Because it's being so heavy on Silva's head, now although Silva is taller than Damien, now it managed to lower the posture so much that now there is a minor degree of chest to back exposure. Now it's kind of threatening a guillotine here, a front headlock. Which doesn't work because Silva manages to kind of push him away, but obviously, again, there's a compound effect. So Damien won the exchange because it forced Silva into a big push, into a big defensive reaction. Damien is completely unfazed. He knows that this is playing a longer game. He knows that he's capitalizing on a compound effect of this hand fighting. And again, hanging off Silva's head. And we're going to see again, you see now Damien has double inside position. You see he has a triceps tie here and has a collar tie on with his right arm. Double inside position is one of the best way to move body weight around and to force your partner to carry your own body weight. And you will see now again, perfect example of, okay, Silva says, okay, you have one collar tie, I'm going to get the other one. And Damien says, nope, you're not. I'm going to fight. You're going to have my grips on you. I am not going to have your grips on me. So while keeping his own collar tie, clears Silva's collar tie immediately, you see. And there you go. Again, a little snap. You see how grip is absolutely asymmetrical. Now Silva is gripping and potentially seems like he's being able to force Damien to carry body weight. And it's never the case. Again, clears the collar tie once again. We have a hand snap here. And again, a little snap. You see, although you don't really see this from here now, but although Damien is much shorter than Silva, manages to gain quite a bit of head height on Silva just because of this constant snapping. And then again, you see again, there's a massive head height imbalance. Damien became much taller than Silva because he's constantly snapping. And there we go here again. You see this strong post from Silva. Without this post, Silva would have just sort of smashed his face into the ground. Obviously, that's never going to happen because he can always post. But you see here again this kind of wide posture from Silva, and this contracted athletic posture from Damien. Silva is carrying body weight, lost head height. You see Damien's head is higher than Silva's. Carrying body weight, forced to pose, contracted position, extended position. And once again, head height, snap. You see, whenever, this is something that I always tell my students, whenever you expose the back of your head to your partner, that's no good. Whoever manages to look at the other person's back of the head, he's winning the exchange. So you see, this is a perfect example. Damien is looking at Silva's back of the head, as it were, and while Silva is looking at the ground. Okay, whenever you force your opponent to look at the ground, that's always a win. Especially if I'm looking at my opponent and my opponent is looking at the ground. Okay, this should be one of the sort of the first goals of your hand fighting game. Look at your partner while your partner is looking away from you, potentially at the ground. Once again, clears the collar tie. Again, we're not accepting symmetrical gripping. And eventually setting up your beautiful sort of single leg. Doesn't really work. Footwork doesn't work. And again, and once again, this amazing configuration. This is very clear. Looking at the back of his head while Silva is looking at the ground. Look at the amount of head height imbalance there is in this position. This is amazing. Like, Damien is much shorter, and yet look at how his head is much, much taller. And once again, a little snap, just because. This is a very, again, once again, another snap. You see, this is a very simple strategy. You know, he's not doing anything fancy, but he's being very disciplined with asymmetrical gripping, forcing Silva's head down, looking at the back of his head, as it were, and always force Silva to take a step. Again, hanging, never accepting symmetrical gripping, and once again, here we have this amazing configuration. Now what this does is that, and once again, look, this is another perfect example. I force Silva to take a step. Silva had to post once again, this triangular position, very extended, very vulnerable backward and forward, although it's very stable kind of on this line. While Damien, on the other hand, is in a very athletic and sort of contracted position versus an extended and vulnerable position. And they go back in the middle. And once again, yet another step just to force your gaze down towards the mat. Now, Silva is hanging off, and Damien is immediately going to clear. Very, very disciplined. You see, now this is a configuration in which Silva is in fact looking at the back of Damien's head, while Damien is looking at the ground. And Damien says, well, this is no good, and I know exactly why this is no good, so immediately I'm going to start peeling the collar tie, and there you go. Here we are again. As I attempted to blast double leg, and here we are again with the snapping, hanging. This looks like a symmetrical position, but it isn't, because now Damien is already peeling Silva's hand, while Silva cannot peel Damien's collar tie. You see? There we go. Asymmetrical once again. Damien is hanging, is forcing Silva to carry body weight, while Damien himself is not carrying any body weight anymore because he peeled Silva's collar tie. And again, huge snap. Obviously the neck is getting tired. We're getting at the end of the regulation period. Managed to get again some chest to back exposure. Cover the back of the head. Again, this amazing snapping action. Now what this constant snapping action does, again, once again, you see here the constant stomping of Silva's foot. What this constant snapping does is that eventually Silva will have to adopt a much higher stance because his neck is getting tired and is getting tired of getting sort of collar tie bullied by Damien. because Silva's posture will get higher and higher to avoid getting snapped forward, then Silva's leg will become easier and easier to get as the match progresses, which lead Damien into Silva's legs. And this is exactly what will happen. You see how Silva's snap didn't really work, didn't really force Damien to take a step, sorry. You see, there's all that stepping that Damien is doing is all proactive. He's not being forced to step by Silva. This is a mark of a superior hand fighting. And once again, you see, was a little step here that Silva had to take just because of this collar tie, and then he immediately reacted with the foot sweep, but obviously it doesn't work because Damien is in a very stable position. His body weight hasn't been moved around. And once again, we're at the end of the regulation period and we go into overtime. Points are in. And again, hanging. Immediately clearing again. You see the discipline. They've been doing this for almost 20 minutes or something. 10 minutes. Again, clearing collar ties. Obviously, this is an edited video. And here we are. You see, after you cook your partner's head for 10 minutes, 8 minutes, whatever, how long that is, eventually your partner posture will rise and you'll be able to shoot into the legs. So you can see here, hand fighting strategies, being very disciplined, very clear goal in mind, and a very, very basic sequence that over time had a compound effect because it forced Silva to take body weight, to carry body weight and get his posture broken again until he had to sort of build height with his head to avoid getting snapped, which eventually opened up the legs. And this is the sequence that won Damien the match, because now Damien is on top and eventually he's going to end up taking Silva's back.